Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman, and my guest today from True Tickets is Matt Zarracina. Before I tell you about my conversation with Matt, who you will be able to hook up with at INTIX in Las Vegas next week, let me remind you to check out my website. It's davewakeman.com to get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com and join our Slack channel. That link is in the show notes. I would never try to tell you all those letters and numbers in the URL. But back to Matt. So Matt is going to be at INTIX in Las Vegas next week. And before we got to INTIX, I wanted to have Matt on to talk about, how True Tickets has come up with some integrated resale. And they've launched this and some of the cool things they're doing around resale and kind of how this new iteration of the company goes back to our initial conversation in 2018, I believe. So we talk about the shadow audience. We talk about, face value caps. We talk about the new dynamics in the ticket market. We talk about some case studies around resale and how people can use it. We talk about understanding customers better. We talk about patron safe resale. We talk about, what the ticket sharing experience looks like for a buyer. We talk about dispelling some of the notions around resale. We talk about, measuring demand and using resale as kind of a tool in that. We talk about legislation and enforcement. We got into kind of a really comprehensive conversation, one that kind of builds off the initial conversation we had way back when, and it's a nice way to introduce everybody who's listening and going to be at INTIX into some stuff you'd learn at INTIX next week. So check out this conversation with Matt Zarracina on the Business of Fun. Okay. I want to welcome Matt Zarracina to the Business Fun for the second time or third time?
The third time, I think. Well, and then you had Steve. So if you count Steve, that makes actually
that's four. Definitely three times. I was gonna say, so at least True Tickets has got a nice run of episodes here. We have traveled the course of time together. Because Steve was one of the first podcast guests, I know for sure. And I don't think you were too far behind as far as an early podcast guest. And now look at us 8 years later. This is 250 something episodes. Quite a body of work we've got going here.
Oh yeah, and look, Dave. Obviously, I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy that we've had the longevity that we can be invited back and add kind of new information.
Both of us.
Add both of us. Add to the ticketing discussion, because there's always something interesting happening in this space.
Yeah. So this episode, this recording is going to go out, right? We're recording it before Christmas, so happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Right? Yeah, we're going to do that. We'll say that, but we're going to release this right before INTIX, and we have a specific idea that we're going to introduce today, because you have just released I think what you called kind of the culmination of the initial True Tickets concept. And I'm going to let you tell everybody what that is, because I don't want to butcher it and then you have to go back and explain it. So I'll just have you explain it from the start.
I appreciate that. So obviously, Dave, you've known about us since our blockchain beginnings, and in many ways that informs what our vision and North Star has always been, right? So for our clients, we're continuously focused on helping them know who their actual attendees are, right? Develop that direct connection. And a couple of years ago, I think when I was last on the podcast, we talked about the ticket sharing capability we released and how it was really unique, and that it was focused on we call it the shadow audience of our clients, right? The people who come in that they know the organization, but the organization doesn't know them. But when we started True Tickets, the vision was always about how do you extend visibility, transparency into follow-on transactions, right? Essentially resale markets, ticket resale. And that's really what we've, for all intents and purposes, accomplished with patron safe resale. So we announced the launch earlier this year. I think it was summer of this year. And we've got a small number of our clients on it now. I'm currently running, and it'll be done. It's kind of this resale data poll, and I know you've participated. I appreciate your engagement on that, where we've got a pretty consistent data set, at least for the first three and a half months, that's helping us really try to understand, what's interesting here, right? So, and so we're seeing our clients use it, but all our clients that have implemented it have put face value caps, which I know is a topic that's constantly up for debate. I mean, it's been legislated now in the UK. So there's people have a lot of thoughts around efficacy and viability. But kind of going back to your original question, it's patron safe resale is the realization of that blockchain vision, right? It's providing visibility, it's providing monetization, it's providing transparency into the secondary market, which, look, for the patrons of our venue clients, it provides them flexibility. To be honest, they expect, right? When people buy tickets today, regardless of people's thoughts on secondary markets, many people are buying with the expectation, if they can't make it, that they should be able to do something with that ticket, right? For the venue clients, it's offering an option for those patrons to offload a ticket in a way that works for them, but also in a way that gets them data as well as fuller houses, right? So you want to provide your patrons options that don't create unburdensome risk for you. You want to get the data, you want to know who's coming, but also too, you want a fuller house. The empty seat doesn't buy F&B, it doesn't buy merch.
Right.
And empty seats create a less than ideal experience. When you go to these shows, these performances, it is better when the house is fuller. There's more excitement, there's more energy. It's just a better experience.
Yeah, well, what's interesting too about this idea that you've been talking about and you've been sharing with me offline and online for quite a while is when you talk about some of the monetization and the visibility and control in the secondary market. You participated, and along with, I can't tell you exactly how many, but I surveyed over 1,000 people for my Talking Tickets global survey. And what I found, though, and I pulled up the numbers as you were talking, was 29% of people find that the secondary market is an opportunity, and 16% found it uses a diagnostic tool. And this plays right into this because what I see and I don't even just see it from talking to people. I've actually asked them about it, now have the data to back it up, is that people want to understand how the secondary market works and what kind of drives people to buy in the secondary market. And I think that's an interesting thing. So one of the things you talked about, you've been doing your survey, and the questions have been pretty interesting because you've been using some of the data that you've had access to for 3.5 months, which is a pretty substantial amount of time. If you take, it's a quarter of a year. What has been some of the interesting things that have come up as you've been, testing this technology out, and then using the data that you found?
Some of the things that were validated, but also interesting, were the marketplaces. So one of the first set of questions I had was around marketplaces. So, our patron safe resale feature allows venues to list simultaneously tickets on up to, I think, 17 or more marketplaces. Look, they can select marketplaces as they would like. So if they have a specific agreement, they can funnel all resale to that marketplace if they want. But a couple of things stood out. One is, as expected, StubHub, I thought expected, was the top marketplace. I think it had about 42% of the market share of our resold tickets. That said, that was lower than I would have thought. I would have thought it would have been around the 60 to 70% mark, and I don't know why that. Maybe that's because of how StubHub just markets themselves. The other marketplaces were about 2 to 3x lower, or I guess you could say StubHub was 2 to 3x higher than SeatGeek, Vivid Seats. The striking one was Go Tickets. So I really didn't know Go Tickets, but they seem to be doing a pretty decent amount of business.
Yeah, Go Tickets.
Yeah, then there was a layer underneath
that. Friend of the newsletter, friend of the podcast, Go Tickets.
But yeah. So I say that not to disparage Go Tickets. It was a pleasant surprise to see someone else kind of get up there with some of the ones that I think you would all household names. What was kind of shocking to me was actually the lack of a Ticketmaster or Access. These systems, bigger systems that have integrated marketplaces that do take inventory from other sites, other solutions. And I would love to pull the thread on why, right? I would have expected, just based on the volume of tickets we've seen resold over the last 3 months, just even a handful of tickets would have been sold on TM or Access. So I don't know if that's indicative of them prioritizing their own inventory. I don't know if that's indicative of maybe they don't have the reach that maybe people think they do. So it's the data sets unveil, I'd say, revealing to me like other areas to explore. So that was the first one. The second most interesting one was kind of the set of questions I ran last week, which is about mid-December around pricing, right? So the clients that are currently using Patron Safe all have a face value cap. So when you go to list a ticket, you click resell, you select the tickets you want, you then you set the amount of money you want back, right? And the way it's set up that way is because when we're broadcasting to a number of marketplaces, they all have different fee structures. So we basically say, hey, marketplace who wins, you got to give us this back so we can give the patron that back. And that what they want back is then capped. And what I thought was very interesting was that the average resale price for all tickets was about 83% of face value. I thought that was a lot higher than I would have expected for face value caps, right? I thought the face value cap would have kind of resulted in a lower average resale amount. 2/3 of the tickets sold for exactly face value. And look, the venues that are on this, I'd say early next year, probably this time when this podcast releases, we'll have more of our bigger clients on it that have more name brand shows where you'd expect resale activity. So these are more regional type venues, and the shows that are reselling are like Home Alone in concert, right? And so we saw dozens of tickets for Home Alone. Great show. But then again, this kind of goes back to when we talk about dispelling some of the notions around resale. I was talking to one potential system partner, who we're still in conversations with, and they're kind of skeptical about resale. And they say, look, a handful of our venue clients have resale, most of them don't. What I'm seeing with the shows selling and what they're reselling for is there is an undercurrent of demand I don't think people realize. And that, to be honest, it's this like, hey, I just need to offload a ticket. I don't want to get a zero. We're seeing Morgan Freeman's Blues Experience having, a handful of tickets resell at face value, Home Alone in concert. All these shows where you'd say, I don't expect there to be any resale demand for, yet they're selling for face value or near to it. So the idea that like, oh, if I don't have Hamilton, or if I don't have John Mulaney, or if I don't have headlining acts coming, like I don't have this need. That seems to really be kind of the biggest thing that I'm seeing being disproven, or like I'm bringing into question based on the data I'm seeing.
See, that's interesting to me because I would have expected that it made more sense to put up some of these smaller, less well-known shows. But that's only maybe that's because of my experience across the industry, because I know that there's and the way I put it to people is like going, I am never surprised when somebody buys something because I never have any idea what people are looking for, and so it's interesting that you took the exact opposite side on that. But you said you were surprised that the average resale was 83% of face value. I guess, but then 2/3 of it was exactly face. So if everything's face value, so I guess what you're seeing is that if something's not driving a lot of resale value, you're seeing a lot lower sales price. Is that what's happening?
Thinking it's higher.
I'm trying to think of how to ask the question.
But I would have thought, obviously, if I'm someone who's a speculator or trying to flip a ticket or trying to arbitrage a ticket, obviously a face value cap does me no good, right? So I'm going to probably try to figure out a way around the solution. That said, based on the activity we're seeing, it seems like a lot of people, at least who are at these venues who are currently using it, they're not trying to make out on a ticket. It's likely a scenario, and again, this is where some investigation is going to have to happen over the coming months to really determine what's driving this behavior. But look, Home Alone in concert, it's probably, a couple families bought tickets. One of the families got sick, couldn't make it, and so they then say, hey, I'm going to try to find someone else to go. They can't, and then they resell a ticket, which I posted a blog. I wrote a blog, so I went to the Billy Corrigan show at the Lyric Opera Chicago. It was the first first show they scanned with True Tickets. Billy Corgan did this really cool opera, a Night of Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. And I think my experience is emblematic of what we're seeing in our data set, in that my wife went to the University of Chicago for grad school. We were going to make a weekend of it. We were going with a friend and his wife to the Friday night show. The weekend prior, my wife's not feeling well. She says, "Hey, I don't think I should go." I said, "Don't worry about it. I've got a half dozen friends in the Chicago area. I'm texting them saying, hey, I got extra ticket, could get extra 2 tickets. Friend of mine's love to, but can't make the trip. Love to, but my kid's soccer galas that night. Love to, but we're doing Thanksgiving in Paris, which I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't think the French celebrated Thanksgiving. I thought it was a U.S. holiday, but I guess that's a thing now. So anyways, after kind of striking out about 6, 7 times, I just emailed our client at the Lyric Opera Chicago, said, hey, you've got the current version of True Tickets. This is literally a rule you can turn on. Do you mind just turning it on for my tickets? Because I can't find anyone to go, right? And I might as well just try to see if I can sell it. You get someone in the seat, like I get some of my money back because I actually bought the tickets. So yeah, let's go for it. Let's try it. Let's see if it works. And sure, they flipped the switch. Monday morning, I listed them. I tried to get face value for probably a day and a half. And obviously, look, in full transparency, I was more interested in seeing if the tech works. So I was less interested in trying to get all my money back. And so I think Tuesday afternoon, it was a $264 ticket. I lowered it to $209. Obviously, look, on the marketplaces, it was above that because there's the list fee and then there's the buy side fee. And then 6 a.m. in the morning, I mean, we have a Slack channel that says, resale transaction completed. So it just went through, right? And so the Lyric Opera Chicago, 2 people came, 2 people they normally probably wouldn't have in their database. I was able to get some funds back for my ticket. It was at 80%, so it's kind of on par with what we've seen. Mm-hmm. And look, my learning there is, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast. I think there's this undercurrent of demand for people who they're not trying to abuse your tickets. But what they want is just an off-ramp in case something happens. And look, when you think about that, having a resale option that works at the venue level for the ticket issuer, it de-risks the original purchase for that person, right? So when I think back to when I bought those tickets for that show, went on sale, summer, maybe spring. I can't remember when they actually went on sale. I didn't pull the trigger on buying them until August because it wasn't, all right, like is my friend going to make it, his wife, my wife? And by the time I decided to buy the tickets, it was almost sold out, right? So you can see, like, even in my decision making around the purchase, I'm waiting until I got to make sure I can make it, right? And I got to make sure my friends can make it, my wife can make it. And even then, that was without a resale option. Well, think about the calculus of, hey, and look, buying behaviors of everyone's getting later. Right. Mm-hmm. And so what can you do to reverse that? Well, in some ways, you have to you kind of need to de-risk it. And so the hypothesis there is, well, look, if people know about this capability and they have this option, right? Because most venues still have like a no refunds policy. Maybe they'll do exchanges, but great. An exchange does me no good if I'm flying from Boston to Chicago to go see a show. Like, what am I going to do? Fly back to Chicago to go see a show? So having some sort of way to say, look, if you can't make it, here's an option, by the way, that we provide you that works for us as the venue, right? Like, we feel comfortable affording that to you, completely de-risks it, and you just see it. And so, I had a blog about that, and I think that's what we're starting to see play out. And, look, if you're really focused on fighting bad actors in this space, right now, in the resale pool, the bad actors are kind of mixed in with the people who just want to offload a ticket, right? So if you think about it from that standpoint, if you really want to focus your efforts on mitigating the bad actors and the impacts they're having on your organization, creating an off-ramp that says, hey, if you need to offload a ticket, we've got an approved way for you to do it. Works for you, works for us. Go for it. You're then it actually, I think, makes your efforts to then fight the bad actors much more credible and much more focused. Because right now they're lumped together. This creates that avenue where it's like, look, we've got visibility, we've got transparency, we've got that relationship, we can fix problems if they go wrong. And so and again, it's super early, but I think that from I think going back to your original question around pricing, I would have thought, hey, like, people would have offloaded it, they would have shotgunned the sale, they can't make it, but I'm seeing pricing support, a desire. So there's obviously people who want to go see these shows, even though they may not be high demand shows. So your pricing strategy is probably sound. If
Yeah.
2/3 of your tickets are reselling at face value and everything else is around 80%. But then also too, like those patrons we're being able to prove that they're able to get value back, which then
Mhm.
ultimately de-risks the purchase process, right? De-risk the purchase
Yep.
decision. And then that then just creates more value for you and drives them to your sites more.
Yeah. To me, the way you explained it makes a lot of sense because so number one, you can use all the platforms, or if you don't want to use some, like you don't like StubHub, you don't have to use StubHub. You can do because it helps do one thing. Helps these venues use the secondary market in one way that I know they have struggled with, which is
Mhm.
the markets do a great job of SEO, right? And they buying those ads. So the mental and physical availability, right? Because I don't want to. I'm going to hypothesize here. It's like the person that bought the tickets from you probably was like, "Well, what can we do in Chicago?" Maybe I mean, you maybe talk to him. You may even know the answer. I don't know.
I don't.
Oh,
I
okay,
need
yeah,
to. I think
but
this would be great. It's
didn't
still too early.
didn't even know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, Billy Corgan's doing a Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness opera. I'll go to that. So that's mental availability, and then there's a ticket right in front of them, and that's a good way to use the secondary market, right? Because to me, the downside of it is like this free market nonsense that they often sell all over the place, which is like they don't have they have just the skin in the game of the ticket price, and they'll drive the brand value into the ground because it's like, well, I can't, I can only get $1 back for the thing. It gives you a little more control. But so then as the venue, you have it de-risks your brand equity as well because you can say like, look, I can't let these tickets go below 75% or 50% of the face value or whatever it is. So it gives everybody a little bit more security in the in the transaction, I think.
Well, look, you touched on a couple things there, and look, I know there's different resale style solutions out there. Some are creating their own white label marketplaces. Some are trying to do integrated resale on their own site. But you highlighted it. The SEO of these marketplaces, no one can compete with. So the strategy with the solution we built is what can we do from a technological standpoint to make the marketplace dynamics work in the favor of the venue, right? So how can we use that SEO to your advantage? And so when you look at exactly what we talked about here at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, in 3 clicks in 10 seconds, I have 2 tickets listed on 17 different marketplaces. Those marketplaces and their SEO is competing to serve me. They're competing to serve the Lyric Opera of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They're not hurting, right? We're kind of pitting them against one another to our benefit, and it's really trying to change the risk profile. It's trying to change the behavioral dynamic, right? Because the marketplaces, what they want to do is they just want to sell tickets. And
Yep.
so can we do it in a way where it works for the venue, it works for the patron, it works for the end user? And I think that's what's so fascinating about what we've built and how we built it is it changes that dynamic, right? And in a past life, it's going to be a weird story, but in a past life,
That's perfect for this.
I was active duty military. I was serving in Iraq, and I was working on a grad school project at Cornell while serving in Iraq with the Ministry of Oil, and they had a challenge removing a fuel byproduct from this refinery, and ultimately this major refinery in northern Iraq. The system was basically like a completely random system. You had these like 5 or 6 random inputs, and if it got to a level, it just shut the refinery down, and they really didn't know what to do. And the hypothesis was, can we put a control loop on one of those things?
Mm-hmm.
And can we drive this system into stability, this completely random system, into stability by changing one of those? And ultimately, like the research we did, basically changing pricing of this byproduct, you could do that, right? And conceptually, that's essentially what patron safe resale does with secondary markets. We're kind of changing one aspect of this dynamic. we're keeping the players, like we're working with the industry how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically like, can I drive this system into stability and of use for our venue clients through changing one dimension of it? And I think we're proving it out. It seems like we're proving it out, and that's what's so exciting, right? Because it's no longer we can't use the secondary market. They just take advantage of us. What if we can create something that just flips the tables, right? Flips the dynamic and says, actually, you do it this way, you make resale marketplaces work for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so exciting, because now when you think about legislation, it gives teeth to legislation,
Yeah.
right? Legislation without the ability to enforce it is essentially feckless, right? Like the UK laws are great. Executive orders are less effective because executive orders aren't laws in and of themselves, right? It's kind of like, it's great for profile, it's great for publicity, but it's
Yeah.
not effective governance.
Mm-hmm.
Technology needs to underpin it, and I think that's what's so exciting is, again, it goes back to that vision, right? Like, how do we provide visibility, transparency, monetization of those follow-on transactions in a way that works for the patron, works for the venue, right? And that's what we're proving out. I think that's what's so exciting.
Yeah. I always have thought that there's definitely an ability, the technology that was either there or coming online, like you're talking about, because to make the secondary market work for the people in the venues, the primary sellers. I am not anti-secondary market, but I am more concerned with making sure that we get people into these shows, creating fans for life, right? That, kind of my thing. And, something like this where you give people more incentives to buy early, right? Because you de-risk the capability. Because, like, let's think about it like this: if you combine the how do I say, your what is the name of this technology we have here?
Safe,
Your patron safe, yeah, patron safe. Yes, I was like, I know I wrote it like 3 times here. So the patron safe technology, and you combine it with something like a refund protection thing, then you all of a sudden have de-risked the purchase almost entirely, and it makes it so
Mhm.
that you can incentivize people to buy early because, like you said, it's playing out where the last 20, it used to be maybe the week of, you'd see a lot of sales. The bump would at launch, product release, and then the week out. But now it's like the last 24 to 36 hours, and then it keeps getting squeezed more and more and more. And without incentives, you're not going to get people to change their behaviors. And
Look, it's all about what can you do to make it easier for the people you want to buy say yes, and what can you do to create enough friction for the people you don't want to engage with, let's call them bad actors, to just avoid you, right? And look, True Tickets is not a frictionless solution, right? By nature, frictionless means no friction, no
yep.
control, no data, right? So we work to provide kind of the optimal level of friction, right? Like with the way we work, like you're going to have to tell our clients who you are. So just by doing that, there's some level of friction. So we try to balance that as much as possible and provide a seamless solution. But to your point around then how this benefits organizations, there's a whole new opportunity to figure out pricing strategy, marketing strategy. So for example, I was talking to a client this morning, they had hundreds of tickets were listed that didn't resell. So
Mm-hmm.
the next, that begs the question, all right, did those people even show up, right? Did they scan in, right? And what does that mean, right? If they did scan in, why did they list their ticket? How do you engage them?
Mm-hmm.
If they did scan in, were they all, had they ever come, right? And then how does that change how you think about marketing? The same client, one of the shows they were struck, it wasn't a great selling show. And so they didn't enable resale until really close to the performance. And not surprisingly, not a lot of tickets resold for that performance. And it was interesting to see them debate. One of them said, well, I'm glad we didn't do that because if it's not selling great, I want people going to our website to buy tickets. The other person said, well, if it's not selling great and these people are buying tickets to try to resell them, I probably want to turn on resale sooner because I want the
Mm-hmm.
marketplaces to drive the demand. What's great about that is now you at least have a mechanism that's providing you data that you can test. Before that, it was kind of like, putting your finger in the wind saying, well, this is why we do it, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. But now you can actually hypothesize and A/B test things and make much more data-driven decisions around what you do and why you do it. And in some ways, the resale is very similar to some of the stuff we're exploring with ticket sharing. We've got an ongoing collaboration with Capacity Interactive and the National Ballet of Canada. So to date, ticket sharing, we've revealed nearly 1 million new to file constituents for our clients. And those new to file, look, they go on to buy tickets, usually at greater value than kind of your typical new to file, by about 2x, or at least from what I know in the industry. But what we're doing with Capacity Interactive, the National Ballet of Canada, is, look, prior to this, most of our clients take kind of that new to file information and they just funnel it into their normal marketing flow, which is great. And it is generating I think with 890,000 new to file, or the nearly million we provided, it's probably generated 10 million plus in incremental revenue, which is amazing and very helpful for our organizations and their clients, and our clients. But what we haven't yet done is started to A/B test. Like, how should we market to those new to file? Should our clients market to them in a different way, right? When did they buy? Why did they buy? Why did they share? What's driving behavior? And so there's this whole opportunity that we're exploring now with some of the ticket sharing new to files, but then that's going to avail itself with resale. How do you engage these people? Like, how do you drive more optimal behavior for organization? And I think, look, if you're a data-driven marketer, if you're a data-driven organization, this is absolutely where you want to head. And this is complete green space, right? Very few organizations have had an opportunity to explore this. And it just opens up the aperture for these organizations to be much smarter about their strategies from a marketing standpoint, from a development standpoint, from a pricing standpoint, that I think is going to benefit them long term. And as well as I do, especially in the nonprofit performing arts, margins are thin, right? Yeah. If you can find a half a point here, that's the difference between hiring someone and laying someone off. And the more you can do that, the more you can do data to drive that, the better.
Well, there's a couple things that I think that maybe either we haven't touched on or that we should make sure we highlight while we're still here, which is that if you have, you use the resale, right? It's fan safe, your venue safe. It's safe for everybody. You can test pricing, because then what you can do is you can sell at a discount on the secondary market in a way that you wouldn't want to do on your website, right? Because that's destructive of your brand equity. You can track where people are making these purchases. If you see a large percentage of purchases that are happening on the secondary market, especially if you're having a cap at face value, then you can invest more in your brand building, because you make sure that either you want to get them to your website or you just want people to keep buying where they're buying, right? So you don't necessarily have to spend so much money on the last click, right? And that's probably in the long run going to be more cost effective for you. You can learn all kinds of stuff just like that, and that'll help you make better decisions. Because I think that one of the challenges I see with data, having all this data is great, and having more data is greater, even if you want. It's that you have to know why you're making this decision. And I think that one of the things that I like about the way you've been talking about your solution today is that it's helping people make decisions more wisely, and making it from a point of view, like there's assumptions that people have been making about, when to go on sale, how to go on sale, when the purchases are going to come in, right? Just knowing something as simple as sales are happening later can neuter that desire to discount, because that's only going to train people to wait longer, because they know that you're going to get more and more desperate, right? Knowing that people are buying in different locations will help you understand how to, distribute the tickets better, right? Because you're maybe making the distribution decisions based on outdated information. All of these things will help people just be more wise about the 4 Ps in their marketing strategy, which I'm always about.
Absolutely. One of the problems that one of our clients is thinking about tackling is, look, our single tickets are $200, but the subscribers get them for $136. So when it comes to resale, do we let our subscribers sell at face value, or do we set it so their minimum is is the single ticket face value. And again, this opens up the aperture for how you think about it. You can say, hey, until we're sold out, or maybe I don't know what sold out is for these clients. Maybe it's 95% capacity, 90% capacity. We don't loosen the lower end until we're 95% sold, right? So if a patron says, hey, I want to resell my ticket, why can't I sell it for 136? Why are you making me sell it for 200? Well, here's why we're making you sell it for 200 right now, because it's not sold out, right?
Yeah.
So, and this actually comes from a learning from baseball, right? Where they
Yeah.
were most concerned about their season ticket holders who, let's say, not to ding on like the Pirates, but Pirate season ticket holder buys it. The Yankees are coming to town and they sell that ticket for 10x. The Rays come to town, they sell it for $1. Well, that destroys the walk-up value for that single ticket for the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about the things this can enable. There is a lot that this unlocks from how you engage and what you can test and what that means for ultimately optimizing the value for your organization and your patrons in a way where, again, you're leveraging the marketplaces to work better for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not being taken advantage of by them.
Yeah. I think that's like really like the big key about all of the stuff I've done. The survey, right, has been telling me is that we just have to give people a little bit of information, because a lot of times when they're dealing with the marketplace and the secondary market, it is intentionally opaque to the people in the venues. And it's because they want to arbitrage, right? They use their, like, that's the word they want to use. Really what that means is they want to, work in a way that puts you at a disadvantage. And what you're trying to do is you're putting the control back, right? Like just something as simple as being able to list all the sites at once is something that mostly only the brokers have, because most individuals have the ability, have to go in and would have to set up 17 different accounts or however many it was that you'd be able to sell to. And that alone begins to tilt the dynamic back in your direction. Having the ability for the venue to say, no, these people have been acting, are bad actors. That gives you, again, control. And so I would encourage people to, investigate and utilize this kind of technology as much as possible, because I do think that some of the tools that the secondary market has, access to, are very powerful, and and they work. And so you should be able to use them.
Absolutely. You remind me of a conversation I had with one of our major investors. This is early on when we were developing Patron Safe. He said, look, I can sell my ticket on StubHub today. How's this different? And I said, okay, go to our demo site, log in, and logs in. And said, all right, go to the first tab, and I go, just list some of your tickets in that tab. Clicks tickets, enters price, clicks list, they're listed. Said, all right, why don't you go buy a ticket and list it on 17 different marketplaces and tell me how long that takes you? Mm-hmm. He goes, I get it now. And I go, oh, by the way, we actually, our flow, everything's integrated through Stripe. You don't have to have a Stripe account to list a ticket. Almost every other resale site that I've experienced, I have to enter my financial information first before I can list my ticket. Think about the user experience. Most of the time when someone's trying to sell a ticket, they're probably in some sort of hurry. They're not sitting back going, I think I'll resell my ticket today. Yeah. They're literally like, someone sent them a text, can't make it. All right. Maybe I'm at home making dinner, whatever. I got a plan for this. Like, I'm going to list my ticket. I go to a site. I got to enter my financial. All right, I'll do this later. Versus, we've had multiple instances where someone lists a ticket, it resells. Our service sends an email from the client on behalf of the client saying, hey, your ticket's resold. We have money for you. Like, just create the Stripe account. Right. And so we've, thought through it. Into your point, you're right. It's basically essentially like a broker level. It's a broker level capability that's fully enabled and in control of our venue clients that I'm not aware of anyone else offering right now to this level. I know some of the bigger systems have their own marketplace and they just kind of drive that like, oh, it's fully integrated. But again, in a closed loop system, one, doesn't provide me much value, right? Yep. If I want to resell my ticket, I want the ticket listed everywhere. At least that's what I want. I don't want my ticket to go just to a certain site or another site. And like I said, it's been interesting to me, at least the marketplaces that we're seeing transact tickets through our service, those sites that are kind of integrated, fully vertically integrated with the primary system are not the ones where
Yeah.
resales, at least for us, are happening.
Yeah. Shout out to Go Tickets. You didn't even expect them to
Shout
be
out
on
to-
there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It also goes back to this idea that I talk to people about all the time, which is if you only have like you said, a closed loop system, if you are only selling in one place, then you're under the assumption that they know what they're doing, that they're doing things the right way. Whereas like if you have the ability to list in all of them, then somebody's got to know what they're doing, or you may not just be able to sell it, but that's, you at least know you gave yourself the best chance. Or to further this point a little bit more, Matt might want to sell it everywhere, but Dave might not like certain sites because I've had a bad experience, so I want to like unclick 3 or 4 of them and be like, screw those guys. They're not getting my sale. They're not going to get this great ticket to the melancholy that I have, but that's the beauty of it. Competition helps, knowledge helps, and having the ability, to create mental and physical availability for somebody who may just stumble across a ticket to your show as a venue is also really great, because a lot of times you don't know what that last little nudge is that gets people over the edge, because we invest way too much energy and time and focus on the last click, but we don't know what's really driving that last click.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fascinating. To your comment around kind of competition, when I listed my tickets for the Lyric show, I looked at probably 5 or 6 listings of the 17 I could have. There was like a 10% spread, right? And now, like, the nice thing is, obviously, they do the all-in pricing, so it was a 10% spread. Look, not shocking. StubHub was the most expensive. So look, the fact that they're getting the most resale volume, it looks like obviously they're spending on marketing. That's incorporated in their fees. But obviously some of the lower fee services are driving, I'd say, material traction and material sales, right? So there are buyers out there who are comparing prices. It's going to be really interesting to see, how that manifests itself and how that changes maybe the competitive dynamic of these marketplaces. But a 10% spread on essentially the same tickets, massive in my mind, right? And so it like I said, I think,
especially if you're talking like a $250 ticket.
Yeah, I mean, literally the spread I saw
25
was
bucks is a drink or two.
Well, when I listed it
Dinner.
when I asked for 264 back, I saw prices kind of all in pricing ranging from a low of like 342 to 373 or something like that. And so, I mean, that's crazy to me, right? And look, part of some people might say, well, that's ridiculous. Like, an end user shouldn't have to pay that. They should get that ticket for 264 or what have you. Look, markets are both efficient and inefficient, and that's what makes them work, right? If markets were completely efficient, there would be no opportunity. And part of that is, look, that's the cost of, in some ways, I reconcile that as like, that's the cost of doing business. And if you had to pay that to get that client in your database, you probably would be okay with that, right? And look, if they really wanted to go, they're deciding that that amount of money was fine for them for that show, right? But now it's on you, in this case, Lyric Opera Chicago, that person bought that ticket, market to them. Develop that relationship, sell to them directly, create an instance where they know to go to you and not to StubHub or not to SeatGeek or not to Vivid Seats or not to Go Tickets, right? And look, on Go Tickets, it's on you now to provide like the value to that person to keep coming back to your site. So the competitive dynamics, like I said earlier, you change one thing, you can kind of completely change the competitive dynamic of an industry. And I think that's what's going to be so exciting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, the more competition to me, the better, because that creates an innovation. It creates new thinking. It creates better marketing, better strategy, better across the board. Matt, I know people, I'm going to release this right before INTIX, so I know people will be able to find you at INTIX, but where else can people find you? I'm also losing my voice, so I have to go.
Yeah, I know. We'll be quick. Look, they can obviously find me on LinkedIn. Matt Zarracina, I'm pretty easy to find. You can check us out at www.true-tickets.com. We've got all sorts of information. I say that our website's the best place to learn about us. Look, if you're right now, we've got a plug-and-play solution for Testera clients. We're in conversations with a number of other systems. Look, we built True Tickets for the industry, right? So there's no need for anybody to try to go out and build this. It's actually a lot harder than I think people think. So if you're a venue that we could be of use for, or you're a system that you think we could help you be more competitive in the marketplace, feel free to reach out. We're constantly, we're looking to grow. We're looking for more partners, and we're looking to proliferate this capability more broadly across the industry. Because if we do, it's gonna benefit patrons. It's gonna benefit rights holders. It's gonna benefit venues. And I think that's what's most exciting about what we're proving out here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this, man.
Awesome, Dave. Great to see you. Obviously, have a great holiday. Have a great new year. And for everybody listening, hope you had a great holiday and had a great new year.
Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Matt by sending me an email. It's my name, Dave at davewakeman.com. Hook up with Matt and the guys at True Tickets at INTIX in Las Vegas. Make sure you check out my website, davewakeman.com, and get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. And check out the link for the Talking Tickets Slack channel. We're getting close to 400 people, give or take. I'm not sure where the number is right now because I'm recording this a little bit before the episode drops, so we may have passed the 400 person mark by now. I'm not sure, but it's a great community. I'm going to do more so that you can get out there and network a little bit more with people. And so all the action doesn't happen in my DMs. So come join me, help me out. Let's do this. Okay. 47 minutes into this podcast. I can't thank you enough for spending that much time with me. But do me a solid and rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And if you know a friend, coworker, or colleague that would benefit from a conversation like this one with Matt, things with Martin Gameltoff, the upcoming one with Attila Gazdag from Dynamo Pricing, Josh Litwack, any of these that I've had recently, do me a favor and share them. It helps the podcast grow. It also helps me find new guests. It does all these great things. And I love the positive encouragement. So thank you. And as I always say, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. Take it easy.